Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
UFOs, a Flying Saucers Part 4. Contact Report 558.
The basic condition for space travel inevitably requires the mastery of gravity, so that appropriate spaceflight devices must be equipped with devices that give them their own gravity. Without a spacecraft having its own gravity, which protects space travelers from weightlessness, they suffer life-threatening organic changes which lead to death. Long-term weightlessness in Earth orbit alone is harmful to the human being's health because severe organic changes occur in the body, including brain shrinkage, etc.
So without a spaceship or any space vehicle having its own adequate gravity, which must be produced by apparatus and equipment, etc., to protect the human being from weightlessness, effective space travel is not possible. If there is no gravity in a spaceship, then in the long run health damage will occur, which also leads to death.
That is correct. Mastering gravity is a fundamental requirement, but so is mastering and neutralizing the effects of the acceleration forces inside and outside the spacecraft.
You are probably referring to the acceleration forces which, on the one hand, do not create any pressure forces for the human being inside the spaceships, and which, on the other hand, can distort the material on the outside.
Yes, but I am not allowed to talk about how these forces are neutralized.
But it is correct that you absorb these forces with your technical possibilities?
Yes, that is correct.
Contact Report 562.
Please, one more question. I have been asked why you still come here on the usual route, which takes 7 minutes, when you have had the opportunity with the transmitter gate for quite some time.
That is no secret. The fact is that we probably developed the technology so far years ago that we have been using this transport possibility for goods ever since. In the first time, however, there was a regrettable loss because we lost some androids when we transported them through the gate. That was the reason why we, despite first attempts with human beings, which all came off to our satisfaction, had to refrain from these attempts again, when, for then indefinable reasons, suddenly goods, and then also 3 androids disappeared through the transmission gate again. Only after a long time could the real faulty cause be found and eliminated. Since then, however, the transmission gate has only been used for the transport of goods and artificial organic life forms in a test manner. These tests will be completed this year, after which animals and human beings may and can also be transported through the transmission gate. If that is the case, then we who are visiting you will also use this means of transport from ERA or from my wide-bodied flying apparatus.
But what about the beam ships? Can a transmission gate also be used by them? Or do we still have to beam from them, like when Florina or Injana come here?
This will not yet be possible, but our technology is also being developed in this respect, so it will also be possible in this way in the foreseeable future. However, the technology for this is still under development and should take several months.
Contact Report 565.
So the 4 groups have been active for a very long time. This also explains all those UFO apparitions, etc., that have taken place for a long time and are still happening today, and which have not yet been clarified from the earthly side. But what about the secret military flying objects of various countries, which you also mentioned? Are they so futuristic and highly technical that they can be mistaken for extraterrestrial flying objects by the average citizen?
That is undoubtedly the case.
But then again, a question in relation to these various secret flying objects of various states, which are also called UFOs, and which can also be observed again and again by many people. Since you are concerned with the military interests of the Earthlings, You should know which flying machines they are, and which states construct them and let them buzz around.
That is indeed so, yes.
You let yourself be asked everything again before you say more. What kind of machines are they, and to which countries do they concern?
To answer this openly would be against our directives on the one hand, and on the other hand it would be unwise, because it could lead to unpleasant machinations and hostilities among the different states. It would also be dangerous to expose these things.
Contact Report 577.
While we are on the subject of the four groupings, this grouping of those foreign to Earth is obviously again and again allowing itself to be observed by the Earthlings. That is to say, their various flying machines are being seen again and again. At least, I assume that these observed flying objects belong to those foreign to Earth, don't they?
These Earth foreigners are indeed relatively often active worldwide, which is why their flight movements can also often be observed. Apart from these Earth foreigners' flying apparatuses, however, there are also secret earthly flying apparatuses with strange constructions, which can also be observed sometimes. These flying apparatuses, however, which we are now talking about, are a matter of concern to Earth foreigners who move in all airspaces around the world.
They are also observed from time to time in Europe, sometimes shining down beams of light to the ground and making vehicles and the human beings shine. Just this week I was told of such a case in Germany, where a truck driver was suddenly blinded at night by such a flying object hovering over his truck and radiating a strong light, the light being, as the driver explained, extremely harsh, while in addition no sound could be heard from the object itself, so it was completely silent.
We are familiar with such light patterns from silent flying apparatus on vehicles and human beings, as well as on buildings, animals, and the ground, and they are typical of the Earth foreigners I mentioned, about whom we have gained much more information since my last visit on the 9th of December. This has been made easy for us thanks to our new technical equipment, although we run no risk of being noticed by these Earth foreigners because their technology is still inadequate compared to ours in general. And just as it has been up to now that they have not been able to detect and register our presence, it will also remain the same. In those days when we made ourselves or our flying apparatuses visible for your photographic work or, exceptionally, sometimes also for group members so that photos could be taken, we always shielded ourselves from any other view so that only a wedge of sight remained open from our flying apparatuses to the cameras. The same was true for eye contact or normal observations, so that in this respect, only one wedge of sight to the eyes of the observers remained open, and the flying apparatus was also shielded against any technical detection, etc. As a result, it was never possible for other observers, such as Earth foreigners or Earth humans other than those for whom we made ourselves visible, to see or locate our flying apparatus. And this will also continue to be the case.
Contact Report 578.
With regard to both these announcements, if it does not concern charlatanry, as unfortunately is often the case in such announcements, such as by falsifying pictures, how this can be done today and very easily without any major machinations with computers, which is also very frequently the case, or in order to simulate UFOs just for fun or charlatanry by using hobby-based models of balloons, zeppelins, and other flying devices, then probably unidentified flying objects can be spoken of if they cannot be identified. Natural phenomena as well as secret terrestrial military flying devices also belong to UFO observations. Next, however, the four foreign-to-us groupings must also be taken into account and considered, which could be responsible for UFO appearances. In our point of view, the aforementioned foreign-to-Earth grouping is indirectly connected with many unidentified flying objects, which since time immemorial have repeatedly appeared and have been observed on Earth and about which also many records are noted in our annals. The explanations are interesting, which say that Earth foreigners have been observed from our side in the terrestrial airspace for more than 5,000 years, and assertions were made regarding this, which are consistent with the observations made by us in the last few decades.
You've never said anything, as well as your daughters Sim-Ya-Se and Quetzal have never spoken of it. Therefore, the whole thing is completely new for me. And I also knew nothing of it, that since time immemorial, so for more than 5,000 years at least, there was a foreign-to-Earth grouping. And that these probably stand perhaps directly or indirectly connected in some way with the Earth strangers' functionings around the Earth today. That really is a piece of news.
Contact Report 589.
Recently, various television programs have been reporting on earlier UFO observations, and also on various strange UFO encounters. To my knowledge, at least as you told me earlier, all these observations and encounters are not connected with you Pleiaren in one single case.
We on Earth have never been involved in such observations and encounters since ancient times. However, we are well aware that incidents concerning observations and encounters have taken place in connection with Earth humans and unknown flying objects, or UFOs, as the common name is. But we only know this since we have had the opportunity to do so in the last 1.5 decades through the technology of the sonar. Before that, we were unfortunately deceived in many ways by many imaginative Earth humans through lies and deception, as well as charlatanism and also fun. Only with the technology of the sonar we were able to clarify that many Earth humans, who reported alleged observations and encounters or even alleged contacts with Earth foreigners, only told lies and charlatanism, as well as fraud with fake pictures and films. Others, on the other hand, invented alleged experiences and even inflicted strange little injuries on their bodies, which they described as marks and signs, etc., added to them by Earth foreigners. Many of these people were addicted to the desire for renown, as is also the case today, along with religious and sectarian motives and financial profit motives. But when Earth humans have observed flying objects or UFOs unknown to them and encounters with such flying apparatus have taken place, and are still taking place around the world, then these refer today and in the future only to the 4 foreign groups and in no way to us, the Pleiaren or our federated ones. The reason why core group and passive group members were able to take pictures of our flying apparatus was that we opened our screens wedge-shaped especially for them, so that the members could expose their films. However, we only allowed such pictures from a certain distance, so pictures could never be taken in the quality you were able to take according to our instructions in order to have proof of our existence and your statements. But even in this way, we were always careful that we could not be observed, so that there was also only a wedge-shaped channel of vision from the flying apparatus to your picture or film camera, and thus open to your eyes. Accordingly, our flying apparatus could also not be observed by other persons, even if they were standing right next to you.
Contact Report 602.
What I would like to talk about officially, however, refers to the 4 groupings that function with their flying objects on Earth. You said recently during one of our private conversations that I was allowed to tell a lot about it when I was asked about it.
That is correct, but only within the framework that no details are given, which I have explained to you.
I don't mean that either, because it's just that you know that at least 2 groupings definitely come from outside of our present. One of them being Earth future, and the other parallel space dependent. I don't want to say any more about it, but just that. And that's only because I'm asked again and again whether you really don't have any more information about it.
Of course, we have more profound information, but our directives do not allow us to communicate it to Earth humans. If, however, you answer the questioner in such a way that one grouping refers to the future Earth, and another comes from a parallel space, then this information is allowed and does not reveal any important details.
The questions have always mainly related to the observations of the unknown large flying objects that have been seen in Arizona and Belgium as well as in England, and that yes, and I think this may be said, fall into the two groups mentioned.
This may be said, but it should be mentioned that certain of the observed flying objects were also of absolutely terrestrial origin and, seen for the public, secret military aircraft.
Contact Report 607.
On Monday, I answered a letter question which I formulated as follows. Are the external shape and color of the jet ships 100% determined in terms of use, and do they not have to satisfy any aesthetic requirements? I have written the following to the questioner according to what I know from your explanations. Now to your question concerning the outer also inner forms and colors of the Pleiaren beam ships, which I can answer with the fact that they have no aesthetic background, because they are purely useful in every respect. The following may serve as an example. Some jet ships have a kind of metallic, wide-colored and slightly wavy ring band at their outermost rounding, some also on the surfaces, which produces a change of color depending on the type and density of atmosphere. Also, the windows are of the same kind, because also these consist of a very hard metal, which is transparent on the one hand like glass. On the other hand, however, also according to the kind and density of the atmosphere, the color changes. In our earthly atmosphere and near the ground, we get a red color of the windows, but if we look from the inside to the outside, we get a yellowish-green effect. As I was told, these colors determine the protection of the outer beam ship material, which in any case consists of a special, very hard and resistant alloy. The colors thus have an effective protective effect that spreads over the ship and the windows, and repels any foreign bodies that may appear in the atmosphere of a planet and hit the beam ship. The colors also indicate the state of the atmosphere, etc., as I was told. So colors and shapes are purely useful.
Contact Report 608.
Then I now have a question concerning your beam ships and other flying apparatuses, which can actually float as if weightless in the atmosphere and are not dragged by the gravity of the Earth, as your father Svath already said. Can you tell me the reason for this in simple terms, unless this concerns a secret? If you are able to explain it in simple words, so that the whole thing can also be understood by the technically and physically uneducated human being, then it will be useful.
In all our flying apparatus, an anti-gravity state is created for the outer hull, wherethrough it becomes as if weightless for an external, that is to say, planet-related gravitational force, and thus does not have to withstand any force of attraction. This, while in the interior area of the flying apparatuses, a permanent and adapted to our living conditions, gravitational force prevails. Furthermore, our flying apparatuses generate an anti-gravitational force that is adapted to any external gravitational force, through which it is made feasible to neutralize the latter, wherethrough, from a standing position, very high speeds can be reached, without the passengers suffering harm, because they are protected by the inner gravitational state. Consequently, they are also not exposed to a gravitational pressure, as is the case. To the contrary, for example, with human beings of Earth in relation to earthly vehicles, flying apparatuses, that is to say aircrafts and rockets, which are exposed to a gravitational pressure. Therefore, with all our flying apparatus, as a result of our highly developed gravitational technology, there never comes about a gravitational pressure, just as you have experienced it yourself.
What I want to ask you now relates to the four groupings of which you have spoken on various occasions, whereby you were able to identify two definitely. But then there are still the other two, and what about them? Have you also gained insights on them?
That is so, yes, one relates to those foreign to the Earth, and the other to earthly human activities, to which I, however, do not want to give a more detailed explanation.
Contact Report 625.
Then a question regarding what you once told me, namely that in the United States there is a grouping, that is to say, a secret organization, that is very well concerned with the things about extraterrestrials and their flying apparatuses, etc., but which, in terms of its machinations, knowledge and experiences, is, however, shielding itself not only from the public, but also in relation to the U.S. President and the senior rulers, so that they are all left in unknowledgeness and not informed. Is that still the case today?
Yes. And this corresponds to an undisputable but extremely secret fact, whereby the responsible ones of this grouping are also anxious to deny and conceal their machinations, cognitions, and experiences about non-terrestrials, the way these are given regarding non-terrestrial existences, activities, relations, and incidents, etc. This grouping, that is to say, secret organization, also poses a great danger to persons who make certain observations regarding so-called UFOs, as well with regard to secret activities that originate from the grouping. Particularly when observing persons want to get to the bottom of the matter and thus create elucidation, they run the risk of getting caught up in the cogwheels of the secret organization and being gone after or even harmed, should it end with nothing but harming.
What do you mean by great danger? Must it be understood as danger to life and disappearing from the scene?
That corresponds to what I mean.
Aha, then we are, as in the past, back with the dark-dressed ones, seamen in black, who also followed Gilgamesha.
Contact Report 630.
Every object and everything, a planet or a flying machine, that is to say, everything that has its own natural or artificial electromagnetism, has its own magnetosphere, which means that on the one hand an attraction force, and on the other hand also a repulsion force is given, whereby the latter is called Lorentz force in our physics. Is this force decisive for the fact that you can accelerate your aircrafts in earthly atmosphere with very high speeds, because the Lorentz force works against Earth magnetism, or rather, puts it out of action in relation to your aircrafts, so to speak?
That is correct, but I am not allowed to give further details because it is forbidden by our directives.
Contact Report 645 Svarth. 1947. The world space is also traversed by dark and mighty world space wanderers with great gravitational force, through which time streams are created, so that those who travel the world space can get into such time streams, although we are protected against their effects. This is because our spacecrafts have their own gravitations and are therefore protected against external time influences, as well as against matter and radiation. And we are also protected by our gravitational technique against the effects of speed, so that time does not slow down for us in the spacecraft when we move through space at very high speed. And in order to compensate for the flow of time outside the spacecraft, which is caused by high speeds, we have a special technique of time travel, which allows us on the one hand to remain in the so-called normal time despite high speeds, but on the other hand also to travel into the past and future. Contact Report 651.
We have repeatedly spoken about the so-called UFOs, and the four groupings that just turn around in earthly space with unknown flying objects. And to these four groupings belongs also the group of the Earth Future Ones, which are however actually two groupings in themselves, as you already told me at the beginning of our contacts with private conversations. Your daughter Simyase, but also Quetzal and yourself talked about it, but it was never published in discussion reports, because it was always private. So it was not until more recent times, when you made certain observations and gained unambiguous insights and came to important evidence, that there was a halfway open discussion about it. I would now like to ask to what extent it is permitted to talk about this in an even more open way now, as well as with regard to the fact that the grouping of the Earth Future Ones actually corresponds to two groupings, and why you call them so and only as one grouping. Because they are actually two of them?
And we call these groupings Earth Future Ones because the one grouping is effectively Earth Future, or exists in the distant future on Earth, and comes through time bridges into the present time.
Excuse me, by time bridges you mean time travel, as we say. In this case, the future Earth humans are those Earthlings of the distant earthly time who already live on Earth in the distant future and who, through the possibility of their time travel technique with their various small and large futuristic flying machines, have been coming into earthly present since time immemorial, and also into our present today. However, this is also done by the other group, Earth Future Ones, which has its state in a certain underground area of Earth, has a general futuristic technology, and therefore also very highly developed aircraft. These aircrafts, which I call so in your sense, are an earthly technical development for today, which is completely futuristic, that is to say progressive, innovative, progressive, trend-setting, ahead of the present time and therefore trend-setting, etc. With regard to this second grouping, which you also call future Earth humans, it must be said that these are not, however, descendants of extraterrestrials from the distant future of Earth, nor are they direct, but indirect, very distant descendants of extraterrestrials. These people live deep underground under Earth's surface, and with their futuristic flying machines they also turn around in Earth's airspace, as I already knew from Asket, because she had already initiated me in this regard in the 1950s, but she was spoke. Also, your daughter Sim Ya Se Quetzal and you explained a lot to me, but you always said that I shouldn't talk about it officially because it's not the time yet. It is mainly this group of the future that makes a name for itself again and again, especially in the Western world. And this happens very often, and interestingly enough most often in the Western Hemisphere, which we call the geographically conceived Western Hemisphere with this term, as a counterpart to the Eastern Hemisphere or Hemisphere. If I remember correctly, the two imaginary hemispheres are separated by the 0 degrees reference meridian at Greenwich and the so-called anti-meridian at 180 degrees. Accordingly, the areas west of London, West Africa and the entire regions of North and South America, Patagonia, Greenland and Canada belong to the Western Hemisphere, where most sightings of various small and large and even gigantic UFOs or futuristic flying objects of the inner terrestrials appear. Especially the UFO appearances in Arizona, in Belgium, and in England, which were probably traced back to these Earth Future Ones, caused a huge sensation in the worldwide media. I would be interested to know why these Earth Future Ones are so frequent in the Western Hemisphere and still are today, because in the Eastern Hemisphere such futuristic aircraft or UFOs are observed less often. That is to say, in the majority of Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand and Oceania, which are counted to the Eastern Hemisphere.
What you say is correct, and the reason why the inner terrestrial and also earthly future Earth Future Ones operate especially in the Western Hemisphere is to be justified with this, about which, however, silence is required.
But why? This is the question. Do you call these inhabitants of Earth also Earth Future Ones, of whom we have already spoken before, and whom, with a few exceptions, you have always named only in this way, without giving an explanation? That is simply not clear to me, nor is it clear to me why you have never said anything more specific about it, or defined the term exactly.
The reason for our name, Earth Future Ones, is based on the fact that the entire technology of the inhabitants of Earth's interior state corresponds to a future earthly technology, which will only find its beginning in the near future and also will only become reality in the distant future.
All right, we don't have to talk about that, because you answered my question, so you don't need it anymore. Then again, a question. Are the three that I have in I met, as well as the two in Khartsi, so relatives of this, what you call her by her real name? If so, then they live in the subterranean state structure in the area of... but they also go under the people on Earth's surface, but despite remain unrecognized or are replaced by the surface Earth objects because they may know a lot about you.
That is also true, but there is a duty of secrecy about it, because our directives do not allow us to officially divulge our findings, because it would inevitably result in warlike and conquering actions. This would be the case if predictably and inevitably certain power-hungry statesmen of certain countries, with their military forces and secret services, etc., were to break into the underground state structure in order to protect the far-reaching futuristic technology of the to get your hands on it.
Contact Report 660.
As members of our Federation, the Druans perform certain incidental activities for us, which are within the framework of also certain observations that are related to two of the Earth foreigners.
You have already said several times that you no longer care about these Earth foreigners, and also no longer about the earthly groups that are always talking about themselves all over the world, in terms of observations. But why do you do it recently nevertheless?
Now that belongs in your trappings, which I am not allowed to state openly, as I said.
What I am interested in now, though, if, as in 1983, the Druans let their ship appear as a mirror image somewhere, as it was 26 kilometers away from our center as the crow flies, whereby the mirror image also appeared at an altitude of 36 kilometers, then I ask whether the ship is also visible at its location, from where the reflection is emitted, or not.
Of course it is not visible because it has to remain invisible.
Interesting. Then the whole thing with the mirror image probably serves as camouflage and misdirection, so as not to be able to fathom and locate the actual location of the real ship, I think. Clever thinking and action.
Contact Report 669.
Another phenomenon of light phenomena is marsh gas, which is produced as a naturally occurring mixture of methane and carbon dioxide, usually in the marshes of swamps by fermentation of plant parts with the participation of bacteria. However, it is also possible that swamp gases are formed over fields, floodplains, fields, and meadows, which can also appear as luminous formations, where no swamp can be seen at first glance, but where one or more swamp bubbles exist somewhere underground, allowing the gas to escape upwards into the open air. Another possibility of light phenomena is based on visible and moving, luminous, spherical, or disc-shaped electromagnetic light formations, which are very small, but can also reach a size of more than 1 meter. These luminous structures rise to a height of 1 or 2 meters, float around in irregular orbits, only to collapse and dissolve again, or rise high into the air and disappear. The whole thing can be compared to ball lightning, as you know it from personal experience. Other things concerning light phenomena and unknown flying objects around the worldwide crop circles are the result of Earth humans and private pranks on the one hand, but also of military and espionage research achievements on the other hand.
Contact Report 687.
But now I want to ask my questions, the first of which relates to your daughter Simya Say's beamship, the corrugated iron beamship or washboard beamship. Simya Say once told me that this was her personal beamship and that it was 300 years or so old, and that she had owned it almost all her life.
That is correct. This beamship is a personal possession of my daughter Simya Say, and she received it from me when she turned 14, and has also been piloting it ever since. This beamship is a first model approved for interdimensional ranges in the known universe of the multiverse for youngsters. This beamship model was also equipped with special new techniques that also made it possible to reach into the past and the future, etc. However, the basic model was more than 1,100 years old, but it was redesigned about 400 years ago and was also approved for youngsters.
Contact Report 697.
But something else again. Svath already said that you Playar and do not come to Earth alone as Earth foreigners, but you make yourselves invisible just as much as those others who go around the world in their ships. In your case, I can understand this very well and understand your explanations for it. But why the others also do this is a mystery to me, which is why I want to ask if you know their reasoning.
Not all of what can be observed in alien and unidentified flying objects in the global distance refers to Earth foreigners or to Earth future, because certain of these objects correspond to purely Earth man-made and military secret flying apparatuses. However, as far as invisibility is concerned with regard to those others who are Earth foreigners or Earth future, we have no knowledge of this, because we do not maintain any contacts with them, nor do we endeavor to enter into such contacts with them. Our interest is exhausted by trying to find out their origin, which we have not yet succeeded in doing. I have also not been able to find anything so far that would indicate anything more than observations and explorations by these Earth foreigners and Earth future. And as far as the secret military flying apparatus is concerned, our directives forbid us to openly mention any knowledge gained about it.
Contact Report 698.
But as far as Antarctica or the South Pole is concerned, which you are also interested in, Kolkos, I can tell you that Svath, Ptah's father, took me there as early as the 1940s, then Quetzal too in the 1980s, where they let me see many interesting things by diving with their beam ships.
Contact Report 709.
But now I have something that relates to your energy transmission, which I know that in your beam ships, you, Ptah, in your giant spaceship, as well as in all your various flying apparatuses and on Era, you use in every way, and for all necessities an electromagnetic, resonance energy transmission that is practically limitless in its extension and is based on a technique that in some way touches the automator realm. However, I can neither imagine nor understand anything about all this. Is it possible that you can explain something to me in this regard that would also bring progress for our earthly technology? The only thing that is clear to me is that in all your energy-using achievements, you do not use any cable connections, etc., as is necessarily the case with all earthly techniques today, and is practically unavoidable. Florina and Anjana recently explained to me that, through your electromagnetic resonance energy transmission, which you call something completely different and which also corresponds to something other than a simple wireless energy transmission, you can even transfer energy transmissions from Earth into your space-time structure or into your dimension over practically unlimited distances.
In order to be able to explain this technique to you in detail and to make it understandable to you, you would need, on the one hand, many years of factual training, because the whole thing is futuristic for you too, in spite of all your knowledge, which does not refer to the things of wireless energy transfer. On the other hand, your knowledge of electromagnetic technology reaches such a high level that its connections, possible uses, and far-reaching forms would still be completely incomprehensible to Earth humans. But they could learn very quickly. But if at the present time or in the near future they were capable of understanding this knowledge and using it, then a catastrophe would result, because all boundaries would be open to them in universal breadth. But this must never happen, for the prevailing attitude of the majority of Earth humans towards their sinister and completely degenerated barbarism, as well as all the resulting malicious and pejorative attitudes and behavior towards all life and every creation given existence in general, does not permit such knowledge. The rampant and far-reaching destructive, dangerous, insidious and sinister, as well as deceitful, vile and disgusting degenerations in Earth humans, which are founded in ideologically shaped false and erroneous teachings in relation to a sectarianism based on religious faith, are absolutely geared only towards destruction, ruin, and annihilation. This fact results in our not being allowed to give clear and open information nor explanations to your question, because our directives do not allow an open explanation in this respect. For an announcement would be connected with a knowledge in regard to details which must not be officially mentioned, and this because they would push Earth technical progress too far and drive Earth humans into a catastrophe which could not be stopped.
Contact Report 710.
We call the Earth foreigners spoken of immature, primitive, as well as low-minded, cruel, inhuman, and unapproachable, calling them unfeeling, and, in our judgment, as uncompromising creatures and brutes, because they are of an inhumane disposition and behavior, consequently dominated by contrary impulses with regard to humanity. Compassion, empathy, peace, and freedom, etc., are dominated by contrary impulses. This is the reason for our strict restraint towards these earth foreigners, against whom we have always shielded ourselves from sight and from their analytical swinging waves and techniques in such a way that they can neither locate us nor perceive us in any other way, while we, on the contrary, can penetrate their flying apparatuses by vibration and observe and study them very closely. I am therefore also very well informed that they are of an inhumane disposition and incapable of positive action in the sense of fulfilling nature-given creative laws and commandments or recommendations. The technology necessary for this, which our early ancestors adopted more than 30 million Earth years ago from the Saturn of the Tao creation area, was thus applied very early for the purpose of complete shielding from all Earth foreigners on Earth, who truly correspond to immature and primordial, and whose technology has been stagnating for a long time. So even at the present time, they are not sufficiently developed and not advanced enough for them to be able to locate or otherwise perceive us, even if we were standing right next to them at the shortest distance. It is undeniable that their technology is very advanced, but they are still no match for ours. Consequently, when we openly discuss all these facts since the beginning of our contact and mention our presence here on Earth, and sometimes also make ourselves visible to Earth humans with regard to an observation concerning our flying objects, it also follows that these Earth foreigners are not and also will not be able to realize our presence. This is because they cannot fathom our shielding technology and can neither locate nor otherwise perceive us even under the best of circumstances. For in spite of their high technical possibilities, they are helplessly inferior to our still many times higher developments in every relation and respect.
And our Earthling Secret Service, military and other supervisors with their primitive antediluvian techniques, radar apparatuses, the still secret and all other surveillance devices are even more so. But it is interesting what you say regarding Earth foreigners' surveillance technology. But what about when Earth foreigners can observe your beam ships? Isn't there a danger and possibility that these extraterrestrials will also pick up on it?
There is no problem in this respect, for our technology is such that such sightings can only take place if the Earth foreigners or Earth future, as well as the secretive Earth grouping with the progressive flying apparatuses in South America, have no possibility whatsoever of locating or otherwise perceiving our flying apparatuses on a technical basis. Our security technology is configured in such a way that an automatic fuse shields everything and makes it impenetrable to any kind of detection with regard to all possible swinging waves, but also with regard to light waves and energies, etc., which are directed towards our flying apparatus, other of our achievements, or towards us as persons ourselves. This is also the case when visual observation is made possible as a result of a screen opening, for even then no locating of any kind can take place, either by the Earth foreigners or by any earthly technology. And this is also the case when there is absolute certainty that we are present at a certain place. So all our flying apparatus, as well as all our persons and all our achievements with regard to safety and freedom from localization, are in every respect so perfectly developed that in every situation, everything is always absolutely shielded from counter-vibration, and consequently no localization or any other kind of perception can take place. And this is because our security system neutralizes any locating vibration of any form within a yoctosecond. Consequently, we as a person, our flying apparatuses, achievements, and swinging waves, etc., are absolutely not locatable.
I know this because your daughter Simya-se has already explained this to me. It is not even possible to locate your life vibrations when one is standing close to you, because the vibrations are neutralized directly on the body and are therefore not radiated outwards, as is also the case with your beam ships, etc. So you have a neutralization technique in your body. So you have a neutralization technique with regard to locating vibrations, locating rays and locating light of all kinds, as well as with regard to all kinds of special locating energies, etc. Consequently, our earthly radar and other locating methods are no more than primitive kindergarten experiments for you. But that you have just mentioned the earthly grouping in South America, etc., that irritates me a little, because up to now this was not allowed to be mentioned openly.
You can call it that, as you have explained it. But as far as my statement is concerned concerning the grouping keeping itself secret, it is now no longer necessary not to mention this, to which, however, I will give you a personal explanation later, which will be only for you.
Good, then so be it. However, I have also experienced that this is the case, that your technique is absolutely perfect. As for example, when you took me to the bear in Graubünden on the 16th of July 2005, the first bear to reappear in Switzerland in about 100 years. At that time, you attached a tiny pin to me, which shielded all my life vibrations, so that I could not be perceived by the bear either, and when I went up to him, he even touched me on my trousers without being able to perceive me. Nevertheless, as I know, it can happen that you let out swinging waves under certain circumstances.
This is indeed the case, but only if there is absolute certainty that neither Earth foreigners nor Earth future are to be located within a certain safety radius. Earthly life forms, on the other hand, do not fall within this security perimeter. Consequently, they can sense certain swinging waves from our flying apparatus if they are not shielded.
I see. That also explains to me some incidents where swinging waves have emanated from your beam ships, and unexpected things, happenings and situations have resulted.
I am aware of that, also that unfortunately there have been disadvantages and damage as a result.
Unfortunately, that was indeed the case, but it was the fault of the Earthlings concerned because they. But now I want to continue with what I was saying. Certain abductions of human beings from Earth for various purposes, and thus of course the corresponding contacts, which have taken place again and again since time immemorial, have always belonged to the behavior of the old Earth foreigners and Earth future, as well as to the newer ones who fly in and out of Earth and back again. But the fact is, in spite of abductions, etc., that none of these Earth foreigners and Earth foreigners have, up to the present time, conveyed any messages and the like to the Earthlings, precisely messages with regard to how they would have fallen, or would fall today, within the framework of the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, and thus within the sphere of the Nocademian and my mission. Likewise, like the Earth foreigners are at times to be observed in earthly space with their futuristic flying apparatuses, though the Earth foreigners have just as nothing to do with them as you. Plejaran have nothing to do with them, nor with the Earth foreigners. You Plejaran yourselves have always shielded yourselves from the Earth foreigners when you appear on Earth, who have also been working on Earth for a long time. And your shielding from them is such that you cannot be perceived by them in any way, neither visually, nor can you be located or registered by any apparatus. Your general Plejaran technology, so also space technology and space-time bridging technology, etc., have been so highly developed for millions of years through the help of the sonar from the DAL universe or the DAL creation, that the Earth foreigners functioning on Earth have never been able to locate, detect or otherwise register any flying apparatus of Plejaren origin, or also only any Plejaren activities since their existence in prehistoric times up to the present time. So the Earth foreigners, who work on Earth and are observed again and again, have nothing to do with you Plejaren, just as you have nothing to do with the Earth foreigners and Earth future, whereby, as explained, you are in no way to be located, otherwise recognizable or registerable for them. Moreover, you did not and do not interfere in any way with any earthly political, military, and economic concerns, but have endeavored over all the past millennia to develop in many ways all fields of knowledge and development by transmitting impulses to certain scientists, inventors, and researchers, etc.
That is correct.
Contact Report 715.
Good. Then my question regarding the Phantom Airship Wave 1896 to 1897, after which I asked you to clarify what it was about.
There is not much to say about this, but only a little. Namely, that these were demonstrative maneuvers of Earth foreigners who have been working on Earth since time immemorial and whose present descendants are also still here today and can be observed again and again all over the world. For our part, with the help of the sonar, we have recently fathomed their technology and many of the possibilities, etc., that arise from it, and have come to the realization that these Earth-foreign entities are in fact still the same in their mentality and in their ways of acting and behaving, etc., as they were recognized by our early ancestors as dangerous to us Plejaren. Dangerous precisely in the sense that this danger also exists for us through Earth humans, that we would lapse into the old forms, such as were still peculiar to our ancestors more than 52,000 years ago. Our years are approximately identical with earthly years, with regard to extremely evil degenerations in mentality, action, and behavior. Even after 52,000 years, we are still in danger of relapsing into the old degenerate forms, as a result of which we can fall from the good and positive to the evil and negative in every respect. And in this connection, it must be explained that this backsliding is given in the human life form, as you yourself know and also teach, as long as it still possesses a physical or material body. And with regard to our directives, these also actually ensure that we are spared from relapses into old behaviors, actions, deeds, and into a degenerated mentality. In accordance with our senses and aspirations and our directives, we cannot and must not enter into any contact with Earth humans and Earth foreigners, and also not make ourselves recognizable to them.
Contact Report 718.
But now I have another question regarding the many sightings of unknown flying objects around the world, which have been observed again and again for centuries. This was particularly the case in the last century, as well as in the new millennium, but I must not forget the Foo Fighters during the last World War, nor the objects that we have been able to observe here in the center over all these years, and also at the present time, but which were not from you. The question is, whether you Plejaren ever had anything to do with all the other objects that have been observed again and again around the world. I am thinking particularly of the objects that were observed in the USA, in South America, throughout Europe, and specifically the triangular objects that became known in Belgium, but also in 1976 in Persia, where the military pilot Jafari Parvich, and in 1984 or so in Peru, the military pilot Oscar Santamaria chased after the objects.
No, we Plejaren never had anything to do with it. Because without exception, these flying apparatuses observed everywhere, called UFOs by Earth humans, did not belong to us, but to the aliens who have been working on Earth since time immemorial. If we could be observed and photographed, then we deliberately allowed this to happen only to members of your groups or to persons who were friends of yours, while we specially commissioned you to take pictures and films of our flying apparatus. In doing so, we were also always careful that the strangers could not gain any knowledge of this and make absolutely no observations, because we did not want to give any encouragement for them, as we do not now and will not in the future, to record our presence, because we do not want to endanger our homeland, and therefore we are not allowed to make any contact with the strangers. Establishing contact with any strangers always means insecurity and danger, even if a good relationship is established under certain circumstances, because all life forms are susceptible to overt or subterranean indoctrination, as a result of which a great deal of harm can come about. Under certain circumstances, connections can also result from contacts that can lead to attacks, conquests, and wars, which is why our directives forbid us to make contact with the aliens working here on Earth or even to make ourselves recognizable to them. If we were to make ourselves recognizable to them in any way, then, on the one hand, we would violate our directives, on the other hand, we would run the risk of betraying our space-time structure, and thus also our homeland, and, in addition, under certain circumstances, we would relapse into the old behavioral patterns of our early ancestors due to the influences of the strangers. We Plearen are also human beings and still burdened in our deepest character with unpleasant impulses, even though we have been making great efforts for more than 52,000 years to work them out and to dissolve them. But this takes a very, very long time and always means that there is a danger that through indoctrinating influences of other mentalities, in one case or another, relapses into the old patterns of behavior could occur. This is fundamentally the fact of our strict restraint in every respect towards foreigners. What you asked about the flying objects of all kinds and sizes of the aliens, which have been observed by Earth humans again and again for centuries, even in the present time, and also by you in the center, and by members of the association everywhere, that therefore never had, and never has anything to do with us Plearen, because we have no connection whatsoever with the aliens. It is true that they have a very high level of technology, but it cannot be compared with ours, and is still very much in need of development. This does not mean, however, that their mentality is also at a higher level of development, which, according to our long-term research, is not the case either. In the end, it must be said once again that all observations of unknown flying objects, etc., since all times, as is also the case at the present, new time, can only be traced back to the strangers with whom we have no contact whatsoever and who are also unable to perceive our existence and presence. Our highly developed technology denies them any possibility of being able to locate us in any way or perceive us in any other way.
Also, deliberately false results of the acquired knowledge are disseminated to the public. This is also the case with regard to official, Secret Service, military and air traffic disclosure lists concerning observed unknown flying objects or UFOs worldwide, because in total only about 10% have been disclosed to the public to date.
Contact Report 719.
But one more question. What about when I leave? Because a few days ago we talked about the strangers, and you clearly said that you would not let them locate you. How is it then, if you appear here in my office or somewhere else or go away again, which would also be like this with me? Somehow, when you come and go, there is a small dimensional gate through which you can pass, and I wonder if the foreigners, you used to call them Earth foreigners, cannot detect this, because there are energies involved that are certainly detectable or...
Of course, it is correct that energies are important. But as we know, the foreigners cannot detect them because they are of a completely different nature than all those who exist in this space-time structure and in its past and future. The energies we use correspond to far higher values and are therefore also not perceptible with any techniques from this space-time present as well as its past and future, which is also the reason why the strangers cannot locate us in any way. I am also unable to detect our present here, because we use the same kind of energy for our personal protection, to be protected against sight, and to be imperceptible in every way through our physical, psychological, and consciousness-swinging waves. The energy I referred to, its use, and the protection technique were given to our early ancestors by the Sonairan some 27 million years ago when first contact with them occurred in the Dal creation.
Contact Report 723.
Edward, dear friend, with regard to the observance of the directives, this also concerns, for example, everything around the Earth foreigners, the future ones and the earthly ones, who have always appeared with their flying apparatuses since ancient times, are doing so at present and will continue to do so. Neither about the Earth foreigners and Earth future ones, nor of the earthly ones, was exact information found in the annals of Sfath Ab, just as no information was contained therein with regard to many of your questions. This was also true with regard to abductions of Earth humans by Earth foreigners, whereby such abductions were foreign to us because we have always not cared about them and never made ourselves recognizable to them, and only in the course of the years were able to clarify these things through your questions, and so on. And we did not let ourselves be recognized by them all, because already at the beginning of my father's annals, it was clearly warned against ever coming into contact with the Earth foreigners and the future ones, just as we should also never penetrate into the direct range of their flying apparatus. Likewise, he warned in his annals not to come into contact with the Earthlings and with their equally futuristic flying apparatus, just as we are also to keep away from all their underground bases and underwater stations. And that my father has recorded much in his annals, but has also warned us against contacting the aliens, who probably also do not maintain contact with each other or have no knowledge of each other, as it seems to us, but there is no mention of this in the annals. The fact is that 3 groupings of aliens are on Earth, and that all the occurrences and certain related occurrences that have taken place since time immemorial and the appearance of innumerable unknown flying objects of alien life forms correspond to reality. But just as we have restrained ourselves with regard to your person, so we have also done in other respects, such as, for example, towards the Earth foreigners and rare Earth future beings, who since time immemorial have made themselves known on Earth again and again with their flying apparatus, just as the earthly powers in this respect have also done.
And also, I may still reveal to you a few things in relation to the 3 different forces, as you call the strangers, that are circling around in earthly airspace.
Contact Report 724.
UFO sightings have been innumerable around the world since time immemorial, with such observations largely effectively traced back to flying objects that are the result of the various groupings of aliens that reside on Earth. Otherwise, many observations can be traced back to some kind of earthly natural phenomena, which can be extremely diverse and which are also referred to as UFO sightings. Furthermore, sightings can also be purely earthly fabricated futuristic flying objects, which are referred to as UFOs due to their modern or unusually alien forms, simply as unknown flying objects.
Contact Report 728.
What it means that there are 3 different groups whizzing around in the earthly airspace. I can say that on the one hand, the traditional Earth foreigners, on the other hand, the Earth future are meant, while the 3rd group are Earthlings with their futuristic vehicles. But I am not allowed to say more about that.
Contact Report 733.
Lately, I have been receiving UFO reports by telephone, email, and also in writing from all over the world about some strange flying objects being observed for up to 15 or 20 minutes, passing by one after the other like a long chain high in the sky, and completely silent. I am sometimes allowed to publish these reports of sightings, while other observers, both men and women, wish me to keep quiet about them and not to disclose their reports or names. Obviously, it is about those unknown flying objects, which we have talked about together several times, because you also have these UFO phenomena or UFO activities in your focus, and you have told me various things about it, also in relation to what the reason for the whole of these UFO operations actually is, or what the ultimate background for it is, and what is intended with it in the end.
I also told you to keep quiet about that, and not to make any statements about it when asked.
I also adhere to this. Pah! For I do not pass on a word of what you have explained to me, what you have just investigated concerning the origin of these flying objects, which are UFOs for the Earthlings. I am also silent with regard to your explanations of the tasks, aspirations and purposes, as well as the meanings of these UFOs and their increased flights, etc., which you have found out with your much higher technical possibilities than are proper to the satellites and fellow satellites of this grouping. What I have answered in each case was only related to the fact that these flying objects do not belong to you Pleiaren, and in no way correspond to your Pleiaren techniques. These are satellites, which according to your information, despite their higher earthly technology, are still extremely primitive, just like the objects of the other two groups, which are also still very poorly developed compared to your technology. Consequently, as you explain again and again, these two foreign groups with their UFOs are also not able to locate you Pleiaren, your presence in your beam ships, and just as they, at least the one in spite of their higher earthly technology, are also not able to perceive, and therefore not able to determine that they are being observed, investigated, and screened by you in their secret machinations. And that you are only allowed to tell this realization to me in confidence and obliged to silence, I can fully understand, because, well, various telephone calls and letters from different persons from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, as well as from England, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and Poland, etc., contain questions as to whether these persons are, in fact, the same as the others. These telephone calls and letters include questions as to whether these observed UFOs, objects, are Pleiaren beam ships, which I of course always deny, as I have already said, which is effectively true, because the observed UFOs are in no case flying objects from you Pleiaren, but on the one hand, earthly vehicles as well as satellites and flying apparatuses of other origin. The observed earthly UFOs, objects, which are only called such because they are also unknown to the observers, who have nothing to do with the satellites, belong on the one hand to a special grouping, about which I am not supposed to give any information, while on the other hand further observations refer to another, and moreover traditional grouping, in a completely different context. I have also been receiving reports of sightings of these for decades, whereby these UFOs, objects, however, refer to a traditional grouping that has been circling around in the earthly skies for a long time, that is to say already in the last century, and the century before last, and partly even much longer ago. They are still doing so today, causing fear in some earthlings and euphoria in others, especially when they are generally misled about this grouping by their own fantasies. About the other grouping, however, precisely those whose UFOs, as they are called by the ignorant observers, I am not supposed to explain anything in detail, because on the one hand you advise me against it for good reasons. On the other hand, well, because for another reason it would also be irresponsible to say anything. Irresponsible, in fact, towards my security, which I am not supposed to put at risk anymore, as you said. So I just keep quiet and let the earthlings wonder one day what the UFO fairy lights are really about, which stretch across the night sky. That can well be explained and said, but you have obliged me to keep silent about what the ultimate purpose will be in reality. When, and if we talk somewhat mysteriously about these UFOs, objects and their operators, as well as about this grouping itself, which is connected with these objects, then this may appear mysterious to outsiders, although it is not mysterious, but it would not be good for me personally to say anything more about it, but simply to let it be known that the earthlings will still be surprised. but perhaps you could say something about it which may be said and which is also openly circulating on the internet. The unpleasant things that the Earthlings will be surprised about one day do not have to be mentioned. But if you can perhaps say something more about it?
I can do that. Because officially the convoys of lights in the night sky are objects that correspond to a so-called Starlink project of the U.S. space company SpaceX under Elon Musk and Gwynne Shotwell as part of a planned world-spanning satellite network that is to provide comprehensive internet access in the USA from mid-2020, but will then also be used worldwide in 2021. The purported objective of SpaceX's Starlink project is to create a global broadband internet belt around the Earth, to be assembled on a fleet of between 12,000 and 42,000 satellites. What will ultimately become of all this, however, would be unpleasant. Although in this respect there are only concrete ideas but no firm plans as yet, which, according to our view of the future in this respect, make it clear what will develop out of all this, namely exactly what I have explained to you and about which you are to remain silent. 2 years ago, I confided in you that such satellites would be placed in relatively low orbits around the Earth and that they would receive data from ground stations and transmit them to each other by laser. To this, I also explained that for the time being, this satellite network is to provide wide-area, fast, and at the same time low-cost internet access in the USA, but that if the whole enterprise can be carried through to the end and completed to the last, something very unpleasant will result from it, as I explained to you privately on the 1st of January 2017.
Contact Report 759.
But the projections were also chosen because a strong insulation from the beam ships would have destroyed the trees, whereas such an action would be contrary to our directives and is therefore not allowed, because these directives tell us that we have to protect all genera and species of life forms and only take defensive action against them when there is an effective necessity to do so. But such a necessity never existed in the film and image project work. Consequently, projections were carried out.
I can understand that, but you are using a term to explain a destruction of the trees, which I actually only know from physics, and which cannot be explained as simple radiation. Insulation is the term I am referring to, and I do not understand what insulation has to do with radiation in relation to the beam ships. If you can please explain it to me in simple terms, because I cannot make sense of it with the best will in the world, because the beam ship is not a sun, and also not visible like one and does not radiate heat.
What you say is correct. For the radiation of our flying apparatus is a sun-like heat radiation, which is produced at certain moments and has a dangerous and destructive effect on everything if a flying apparatus comes too close or even directly into contact with any living thing. But since you have not been enlightened in this respect, you cannot also know that various of our flying apparatuses, like that of my daughter Meier, say at that time, were necessarily still effective in terms of heat radiation. This means that our flying apparatuses, which we still used 40 years ago in earthly airspace, were equipped with heat radiators on their outer hulls, which produced a temperature of 276 degrees heat. This corresponded to a precautionary measure by which all poisonous gases in the finest aggregate states, which were floating in the Earth's atmosphere, and which are still present today and will be in the future, were neutralized and burnt around our flying apparatus so that they could not adhere to the outer hulls and become a health hazard to us if they were to dissolve again in our hangars and we inhaled them. The toxic fine gases in the atmosphere, which are just as unknown to earthly physics as the fact that they settle on everything material, just as it would have been directly on the outer shell of our flying apparatus, could have endangered our health if we had come into contact with them. Consequently, we eliminated them by thermal radiation. And this radiation was also dangerous for all living beings. So my daughter Meier was not allowed to come into direct contact with those trees which were used for the purpose of film and image work and which were consequently projected. Our technology in the flying apparatuses produced a heat radiation which has the same effect as solar radiation on the surface of living things of every kind and species, but only more intensely and therefore dangerously and destructively. You know that if we start from solar radiation, the insulation forms the flux that falls on a part of objects and irradiates them.
When I told Meier all about Mr.'s request, she somehow enjoyed it and agreed, explored the place in Meier from where he and I were to take the film and photographs. She also told me to explain to him, which I of course did, that he and his colleague could rest assured that their beamship could not be observed by the population, because for our cameras, for us and for the pilot, she would only open a viewing wedge, as she often did, so that the beamship and everything around it could be seen, filmed, and photographed normally. But outside these two viewing wedges, the beamship was not visible. As I said, Meier had already done this on other occasions.
Contact Report 770.
But what about the fact that the authorities are concealing the truth that so-called UFOs really exist and that they are even being shot at? Like many other things, everything is simply dismissed as a conspiracy theory, and rightly so, because too much nonsense is being spread. But what is right should also be called right and not simply denied.
Contact Report 772.
Equally stupid are the state leaders and the military, leaderships as well as the airlines of all states, etc., who try to negate and ridicule all reports that deal with observations and experiences of and with the aliens. That is to say, with their flying objects, the so-called UFOs, and other incidents with them. Moreover, things are being kept secret that should be made known to the public in this regard, but which, through secrecy, let the peoples run into the unknown. Consequently, they are no more and no less than being led on a fool's rope, as you once said.
Contact Report 788.
Here on Earth, it is still being discussed how life on Earth actually came into being. Then also to what extent it can be assumed how peaceful so-called extraterrestrials are, that is to say humans or human beings who live on foreign planets. Of course I know that planets inhabited by human beings or human beings like them are scattered far and wide in the galaxies, and are not to be found as often as they are depicted in films according to science fiction. This also means that these life forms are not exactly of a peaceful nature, but are more like Earth human beings.
Contact Report 798.
That was really no problem, because I can clarify such things in my flying apparatus, because all your conversations with any of us are stored in every apparatus original verbatim, which are recorded on this planet in connection with you since the beginning with Svath, and not only thousands of conversations, but millions. With Svath's voice, however, only as far as his records have been processed, which means that there is still much work to be done before they can all be recorded in our flying apparatuses that are used in connection with you. So every word that you or any of us have spoken is recorded. This also concerns your notes or your written works that you have produced, which have been recorded as originals and can be retrieved at any time.
Contact Report 814.
This also made the whole thing with that part of the foreigners, the ones from unnecessary, that a contact should be attempted with them, who have been circling around in the earthly skies since time immemorial, but who have never been able to detect your presence, and indeed still not up to today, although your ancestors came to Earth some 25 million years ago, and you can still come here unrecognized from them and do your work. It is quite something that you Plearan have been able to move and stay away from the foreigners in such an unrecognized manner for 25 million years, by which I mean those foreigners who according to your explanations, came from the other foreigners, we can leave them out, because both the Earthlings are keen on your technology, which also includes the second group of foreigners, as well as the foreigners from who could optimize their highly developed technology in such a special manner that they could locate things that are still unlocatable even for them, get hold of you, copy your technology, and then unexpectedly penetrate into your dimension. As it is now, however, their aeroblitzers remain UFOs, which certain Americans, this is of course disputed, denied and kept secret, just like, of course, the military, secret service, and governmental machinations, which would be so monstrous for the ordinary citizen that, if he or she knew, they would pull out all their hair or kill themselves.
Contact Report 819.
But what is also to be said, beyond the faith in mendacious religions, is that many Earthlings are so arrogant and overbearing that they hold the insane view that they are unique and alone in the whole universe, which is why they also deny the foreigners and their flying apparatuses, the so-called UFOs, that is to say unknown flying objects, or simply silently doubt their existence. Although the excitement about them has largely died down in recent years, now and then, I am asked about them by all kinds of human beings from all over the world, as a result of which I have to deal with them. Unfortunately, I am not allowed to give information about what it is all about, where the foreigners with their UFOs and their occupants come from, what they actually are and want, because in doing so I would not only endanger myself and everything around me, but also you, Playarin. You also shield yourselves from the foreigners, as we call them, because you must not be discoverable for them. The reasons for this should be understandable to all those inquirers who think things over and think for themselves. Consequently, they can work out for themselves what would happen if you, Playarin, could be located by the UFO occupants.
Contact Report 824.
But this is again from Yasuhiro. Again, photos that he takes and doesn't want to understand that these orbs, as they are called, are nothing more than different-sized balls of natural gas that float up from or through the Earth. The origin is that there is bubbling magma in the Earth, that is to say, underneath the mantle, which is about 600 kilometers thick, which of course also produces gases that penetrate upwards to the Earth's surface. This has nothing to do with volcanism, where lava is ejected through fissures in the earth or volcanoes, and gases are also released. However, as I learned from Svath and also saw for myself, gases are also simply propelled up to the Earth's surface from the depths of the planet, which then move like balls of mist, hovering above the Earth's surface until they dissolve in the atmosphere and disappear. The same thing happens, as I was able to observe, in the canton of Aargau in the Turbanmoos, as it was called at that time, because the same phenomena occurred in the moor there, except that it was not earth gases from the depths of the earth, but moor gases. At that time, these gas lights were simply called will-o'-the-wisps. Orbs, however, are the natural gas phenomena that look like these photos of Yasuhiro, who has been harassing me for years, claiming that they are the souls of the deceased. Many orbs occur especially in the areas of the Ring of Fire, Japan being part of it, so this is not only an earthquake area, but also underground gases drift up and appear as orbs, and as transparent gas balls that can be photographed. Note: see also Contact Report 478, 81, 284 regarding orbs, which are another type of rods bioorganisms of electromagnetic form.
Contact Report 826.
But as a rule, all this is concealed from the public or even denied, whereby the saying "truth dies first" comes into play, just as it does, for example, with regard to the presence of so-called UFOs, whose presence has long been proven even militarily, and through the testimony of airline pilots, etc., on film or photographically. But what is not allowed to be for state security reasons, etc., simply does not exist, even if everything to the contrary can be proven to be correct. So the effective truth is simply turned into a conspiracy theory, just as otherwise pathologically stupid people make up stupid and idiotic conspiracy theories that are foreign to the effective truth and illogical.
Contact Report 827.
What were you discussing that you said was thought to be UFOs?
It was about will-o'-the-wisps and the like, because these are really nothing more than lights in nature, often created by the Earth life itself. These lights, which are mainly created from ionizing Earth gases, moor gases, swamp gases, and magma gases, create luminous formations of various large and small sizes, so-called will-o'-the-wisps or orbs. So the action of nature in the Earth creates lights, and these shine very strongly under certain conditions, and can be observed and seen from very far away, because they hover in the air, sometimes very high, which is why they are often suspected to be UFOs. I also have to mention the ball lightning, which was also mentioned, and I saw one at the beginning in Hinterschmidruti, about 1 meter tall, which rolled down the roof of the house and then dissipated. However, these are caused by electrical voltages in the atmosphere, and have a completely different origin than the will-o'-the-wisps and orbs. It is a plasmaoid or something like that, with hydrogen, silicon, potassium, and iron also playing a role, as well as a certain magnetism.
Contact Report 829.
For us, it is important that we fathom the activities of the foreigners very carefully inside and out. Apart from the knowledge gained from this, we also know that we have to keep to what we have always maintained, namely that we remain unrecognized, both in relation to Earth's humanity and in relation to the foreigners, whose technology is very far behind ours, but whom they would inevitably want to get hold of if they could come into contact with us. We know very well their aspirations and are able to anticipate what would result from contact with them. In another respect, we are fully aware that all observations of Earth humans regarding the flying objects of the foreigners are consistently denied, concealed, commented on with flimsy lies, or judged as ridiculous by the responsible offices, etc., of the military, pilots, and private individuals. This is despite the fact that the observations are real and correspond to reality, as some of these sightings can also be documented on film or photographically. There are also scientists, etc., who are involved in ridiculing such effective sightings or falsely explaining them as natural phenomena, which in reality are not. And this happens in all states of the Earth, also in your homeland, Switzerland, because a culture of fear of extraterrestrials has also been deliberately created from above, and this fear has spread among state leaders. That is why everything is concealed by the responsible agencies and state leaders, etc., especially by those of the USA secret government who...
Contact Report 830.
I have a question concerning the pranima, as Svath once called it, when he said that it could also be produced on Earth from and compressed in such a manner that it would be over 160 times harder than the diamond we know, although the product in its basic unit would not be bigger than an atom. My question is this: what is this product used for by you?
This material is used by us by thickening the outer shell of our flying apparatus with it and making it invulnerable in every kind and wise. This completely protects the flying apparatus as well as the occupants from any natural and technical influences, as well as from any possibility of damage or destruction.
The various alloys that I had received from your daughter Simya, say, which were of various alloy stages, you build your spaceships with this metal alloy. Are they all then coated with this pranima?
They will, which will ensure our safety.
And if your ships were fired upon, what would happen?
Nothing. Projectiles of any kind would ricochet harmlessly due to the hardness of the metal. If they would reach them at all, which will never be the case, because the energetic protection that is applied around the respective flying object repels any foreign object.
Aha, and how far does this protective shield surround your beam ships, if I may say so?
By terrestrial masses, you would calculate the energy protection to be something around 3 meters.
And this protective shield is really such that purely nothing can reach and damage a beam ship?
Yes, there is no possibility at all.
Contact Report 832.
Perhaps he, Frank Drake, was ignored and laughed at, like all those who have actually seen real UFOs, with which the foreigners cruise around in the earthly atmosphere, which I was probably the first human being to photograph in Switzerland back in the 1950s. The photo then being published by the Tagesanzeiger and in the UFO News by Anna and Carl Veit.
Contact Report 847.
The universal frequencies, through which alone materials and spacecraft be nor, are there any records relating to the frequencies of 110 Hertz and high above, still mysterious to Earth humans, through which the foreigners who have been active with their flying apparatus in earthly airspace since ancient times and to this day, and who are unable to locate us.
Contact Report 848.
You should be clear for once that the Pleiaren are not the ones you accuse of being the evil ones. Whether they accuse those you mean rightly or wrongly, they are probably those who, as descendants of those who in earlier times came from the depths of space and acted as gods, are today circling around in the skies of Earth with their UFOs. Their most distant descendants, that is to say their flying apparatuses, are today called UFOs by the Earthlings, as I have already said.
Contact Report 849.
But now, as Ptah has insistently instructed me, I am to clarify a few things openly, namely with regard to all the various flying apparatuses of the foreigners that have been sighted worldwide, but so far could only be photographed in an unclear process. This is in contrast to our Pleiaren beam ships, as you have always called them, which you were able to capture very clearly and recognizably on films and slides when you worked together with Meier on behalf of our committee and took the photographs. These are therefore, as you once said, hair-sharp photographs of Pleiaren beam ships, in contrast to the diffuse photographically recorded objects of appearance, that is to say, flying objects of the foreigners. These only show very unclear, blurred, and therefore not exactly recognizable objects on photographs. Your photographs, however, should be good, clear, and sharp, which is why you explicitly had to take the photographs together with Meier. The beam ships, as we use them in the atmosphere, can also be used in space and are of different sizes, whereby the smallest are calculated for one person and correspond to reconnaissance devices. This while we also use other constructions of completely different shapes, appearance, and sizes, which you know about. The one construction that was intended for your slide and film recordings and that was used by Meier has 6 other similar flying apparatuses of different sizes. Totally different constructions and absolutely different shapes. Types and sizes are aligned and destined for other uses. The largest of our such objects measure over 2,100 meters by earthly measurements and are being created in the Aaron orbit. Also on Era itself, the large flying objects are produced and afterwards brought into the wide free space outside the planet, because the weightlessness technology and the propulsion of the flying object makes this absolutely possible.
Excuse me, please. It is perhaps important to mention that this propulsion, as you call the purposeful activity of moving the object, that is to say, the large beam ship, is also designed as an interstellar drive. The necessary energy, radiating far, generates the A, which has nothing to do with anti-gravity, as the Earthlings know this, or imagine it futuristically and fancifully. The whole thing has nothing to do, not even the slightest thing to do with what really is concerning the, and is based solely on the which what effective. At any rate, This is what Svath explained to me at the time, I have not forgotten, in the middle of the 1940s.
We too, like the foreigners, have small and very small objects which we use for reconnaissance tasks, but ours are not in spherical form, as these are often used by the foreigners as observation and reconnaissance objects in various sizes and light-emitting. And what I have to emphasize expressly, as Ptah wishes, relates to us the fact that there is no relevance whatsoever between the foreigners and us, Pleiaren, for we have always kept ourselves absolutely concealed from them, in such a wise that they are neither able to see, hear, nor locate us.
Contact Report 850.
Even for the foreigners, it is impossible to locate, hear, or see us, because our entire technology is far superior to theirs. Their flying objects, which Earth humans simply call UFOs, and which cannot be compared with our flying apparatus in any process, nor can they be photographed, are far inferior to our technology.
Contact Report 858.
Also concerning the so-called UFOs, that is to say their crews, who were also the Dagon, the gods they let themselves be idolized as. Many media bring lying stories because they are paid for it, just as also the military in certain countries deceives the population by lies and silence, although they have partly even shot down UFOs.
Contact Report 861.
She also asked what the UFOs really wanted, as well as where they really came from, etc. I therefore told her that they originated from a place that was not in the world. So I told her that their origin or provenance ranged from about 8 to about 400 light years, and that the crews of the UFOs were actually distant descendants of earlier extraterrestrials who had worked on Earth very early. These late descendants actually want peace on Earth and no wars, etc. For example, they have put nuclear missiles, that is to say their controls, out of operation, etc. And IW.
You could probably mention that because in this respect, there are only secrets among the most diverse military, who also deny everything that has to do with UFOs. Also the fact that we have nothing to do with these foreigners and can neither be seen nor located. We have already discussed this several times, so this should actually be known. We Pleiaren have nothing to do with UFOs or other phenomena, as well as with those that come from other dimensions of this Dern universe and effectively do not come from our Ankar universe. This also applies to various illusions, and many also correspond to other phenomena of various kinds, which are often based on imaginations, illusions, imaginations, or simply fantasies.
Contact Report 862.
And it is to be said again in particular that we will neither make contact with the human beings here on Earth nor with the foreign ones. And precisely for this purpose, our committee also wishes you to proclaim the following call as the foremost entry on your website. Proclamation. The flying apparatuses, called UFOs by Earth humans, have no relation to us, Pleiaren, and our flying apparatuses. The flying apparatuses of the foreigners, as well as the incidents of any kind concerning them, which have occurred or will continue to occur in connection with the flying objects, as well as with the foreigners themselves, do not concern us Pleiaren. We Pleiaren have in no wise interfered in any earthly events, and will also never interfere, whatever may happen. We Pleiaren will therefore not interfere in any earthly matters, events, and occurrences that may arise in the future, this also not in one or the other context concerning the foreigners and their UFO flying apparatus.